Have you ever felt it? That quiet, inexplicable whisper deep in your being, the soft hum beneath your thoughts that says, "This might be it." Not in a morbid way, not in fear, but in clarity. A knowing, like you're walking through this life with a certain familiarity, as if you've played this game 100 times before, and now, for reasons beyond words, you feel as though this round might be your last. It's subtle at first, a moment of déjà vu that hits too deeply, an interaction that feels rehearsed, a sadness that doesn't belong to any memory you can name, but feels ancient and tender. And then, over time, that feeling begins to grow. You stop needing the answers. You stop chasing the same things you once thought mattered so much. The urgency softens, and what's left is a quiet sense that you've reached the closing chapter of a very long, very sacred journey. This isn't about dying. It's not about the end of your body, or a grim farewell to the world. It's about the soul. Your soul. The eternal thread that's woven through lifetimes of laughter, heartbreak, triumph, betrayal, forgiveness, sacrifice, and revelation. A soul that has danced in many bodies, worn many names, spoken many languages, and through it all, has evolved, expanded, and remembered more of what it truly is. And now, perhaps it has finally arrived at the doorway of completion. Reincarnation isn't just a belief or a concept. For many, it's a quiet knowing that we're not here for the first time. That the things we're drawn to, the lessons we face, the people who inexplicably feel familiar, they are all part of a larger story, a curriculum of the soul. Earth, for all its beauty and pain, is a school, a deeply immersive, often harsh, but profoundly transformative school. And each lifetime is a classroom, each experience, a lesson, each heartbreak, a teacher, each joy, a reward, and all of it matters, all of it shapes the soul. But not all souls need to stay here forever. Some complete their curriculum. They don't ascend because they're better, or more spiritual, or chosen in some exclusive way. They ascend because they've been here enough. They've learned what they came to learn. They've healed what needed healing. They've forgiven, surrendered, created, destroyed, rebuilt, and loved in ways that expanded their consciousness beyond the limits of this realm. And now, the gravity of Earth no longer holds them in place. You may not remember your past lives in vivid detail, but your soul does. It remembers the fire, it remembers the trials, the betrayals you endured, the lives you took, the lives you saved, the lifetimes you spent chasing power, and the ones you spent hiding from your light. All of it has etched wisdom into your very essence. And if you've felt that strange sensation that you're nearing the end of something you can't quite name, you're not imagining it, you're remembering it. And that's the key, remembering. Because the final incarnation isn't about achieving perfection. It's about shedding the illusion that you were ever broken to begin with. It's the lifetime where you finally stop fighting yourself, where you stop outsourcing your worth, where you stop trying to prove anything to anyone. It's the life where you make peace with the human experience, not by escaping it, but by embracing it with full awareness. You may notice that you no longer engage in the same battles. The drama that once pulled you in now feels like noise. The desires that used to consume you feel like shadows of a past self. You feel less reactive, more observant, less attached, more aware. You find beauty in simplicity, joy in silence, meaning in moments that most people overlook. That's not detachment. That's maturity. That's the soul no longer needing stimulation to feel alive. You've likely gone through phases of intense transformation, the kind that broke you open and rearranged who you thought you were. And somehow, through all of it, you kept showing up. You kept softening. You kept loving. Not because life was always kind to you, but because something deeper inside refused to close. That resilience, that openness, it's a mark of an ancient soul. A soul that has known suffering so deeply that it now chooses compassion over bitterness. Completion doesn't mean you've mastered everything. It means you've transcended the need to keep repeating the same karmic patterns. It means you've witnessed enough of the human condition to see it for what it is, a divine game of remembering. And now, You no longer need to keep forgetting in order to remember. You no longer need to be broken in order to be whole. You're simply here, present, awake, watching the waves come and go without drowning in them. If you feel like this world no longer grips you in the same way, if you sense that your mission here has become more about presence than performance, if you've stopped needing to be someone and instead are just being, these are signs, not of resignation, but of return. A return to your true nature, to the part of you that never began and will never end. And yet, even in this final life, there is still purpose. There is still beauty to experience. There are still souls to hold, still light to anchor. You may not need to be here anymore, but you chose to come anyway, for love, for service, to walk with others who are still finding their way home. So if you've been hearing that whisper, that soft echo in your spirit that says, "This is the last time," listen to it, don't dismiss it, because what you're hearing isn't fantasy, it's your soul. And it's speaking with the voice of 1,000 lifetimes. It's telling you, you made it, you did the work. You can rest now, not in the sense of retreat, but in the sense of release. This is not the end, this is the fulfillment of a promise you made long ago, a sacred vow to awaken, to grow, to love without conditions, and to remember who you are. And now, you do. There comes a moment in your journey when something shifts, not because someone told you to change, not because of some crisis, but because your soul simply doesn't find meaning in the things it used to. You might walk into a store surrounded by rows of glittering items and feel absolutely nothing. No desire, no pull, just silence. It's not boredom, it's not detachment born of cynicism. It's a knowing, a whisper from deep inside that says, "You've had all of this before, and it's not what you're here for anymore." This is one of the clearest signs that your soul is approaching the end of its earthly cycle. It's not that you've chosen minimalism as a lifestyle. It's that your spirit no longer clings to what it once did. At some point, the illusion of ownership starts to dissolve. You begin to see clearly that everything you once called yours was only ever borrowed: your home, your clothes, your car, your name, your status. All of it existed to serve a season, and now, that season has passed. You used to want the best, the latest phone, the luxury experience, the beautiful things to decorate your space. And there's nothing wrong with that, not at all. Those desires are part of the journey. They help you understand beauty, comfort, even abundance. But when the soul starts to prepare for its final dance in this physical dimension, the longing fades. You no longer chase what shines on the outside. Instead, you start to listen more closely to what hums on the inside. You might notice yourself turning away from the world of comparison, where you once measured yourself by how much you had, how well you performed, how much attention you received. Now, you simply don't. That competition never interested your soul, only your conditioning. And now, even that conditioning is wearing thin. You no longer scroll through images of curated lives and feel less than. You stop checking prices to prove your worth. You begin to release the need to be seen as successful, accomplished, or impressive. And in that release, a deeper peace begins to rise. It isn't that you've become lazy, it's that the hunger has transformed. You'd rather feel than own, rather connect than collect, rather sit with someone you love under a quiet sky than chase status in a noisy world. You want to taste moments, not manage things. You want the kind of wealth that isn't stored in safes, but in memories, the kind of abundance that lives in the breath, the body, the being. That's because your soul remembers something your mind has forgotten. That nothing you can touch, hold, or buy will follow you when this chapter ends. Not your job title, not your savings account, not your designer wardrobe. What will remain is the energy you gave, the love you cultivated, the wisdom you shared. And this isn't a poetic idea, it's an energetic law. The physical world is transient, everything here is meant to be temporary, but your essence, that's eternal. This is why people may start to misunderstand you. Friends or family might think you've lost ambition, that you're letting yourself go, or not trying hard enough. But in truth, you've never been clearer. You're not losing your drive, you're redirecting it. You're no longer interested in climbing ladders that lead nowhere. You're building inner temples instead. And while others are busy polishing the outside of their lives, you're going inward, clearing out the dust, lighting candles in the deepest chambers of your soul. This doesn't mean you live in lack. In fact, something extraordinary begins to happen. You become a better steward of what you do have. You take care of your possessions not because they define you, but because they serve you. You no longer hoard, you curate. You no longer cling, you release. And as you do, your energy becomes lighter, clearer, more magnetic. You invest in experiences that elevate you. You give with less fear. You spend with more intention. Money becomes a tool, not a god. That's the quiet miracle of this stage. Your relationship with the material world becomes sacred, detached, yet grateful, practical, yet reverent. You start to see how everything once felt like a need, when in truth, it was just a substitute for presence. When you live your last life, you begin to crave presence more than pleasure, stillness more than stimulation, truth more than trends. You'll likely find yourself craving simplicity, not because it's fashionable, but because it aligns with the clarity inside you. Your wardrobe might shrink, your spaces might empty. Your need for decoration may give way to a love for clean lines and open air. You might feel more alive in a humble, quiet space than in a mansion filled with noise. And none of this is forced. It simply becomes. Sometimes, this shift catches you off guard. You may stand in front of a closet full of clothes and feel nothing, no excitement, no spark. Just an inner whisper asking, "Do you really need all this?" Or maybe you walk through a mall and realize that nothing speaks to you anymore. It's like watching someone else's dream. Because that version of you who once sought validation through appearance or accumulation has dissolved. And what remains is someone far more whole. This isn't about rejection of the world. It's about graduation from it. You're still here, but you're not ruled by here. You participate, but you don't attach. You appreciate, but you don't identify. You live in the world, but not of it. And that's the mark of a soul on its final lap through earth. You have transcended the illusion that having more means being more. And what replaces that illusion is a sense of reverence, for the sunbeam hitting your face through the window, for the softness of silence at dawn, for the laugh of a friend, for the warmth of holding a hand, for the kind of wealth that has no price tag. The truth is, the soul doesn't take inventory of what you own, it takes inventory of what you feel. And if you're feeling more deeply than ever, if you're choosing meaning over materialism, if you're giving more than you're grasping, you're already living from that place of soul completion. So if the things that once thrilled you now feel distant, if your joy rises from moments, not money, if your heart tells you that peace matters more than prestige, know this, your soul is remembering, and it's preparing. You are not emptying out, you are making space, because what comes next cannot be bought, collected, or displayed. It can only be received. There are moments in your life when words spill out of your mouth, and even you wonder where they came from. They're not rehearsed. You didn't read them in a book. No one taught you what to say. But somehow, in the exact moment someone needed it, you spoke a truth that cut straight to the heart of their pain, their confusion, their question. And afterward, they look at you like you've seen into them, like you've touched something sacred within them. And, maybe, you have. You've probably had people come to you not because you had a title, or credentials, or spiritual authority, WT, but because there's something about your energy, your presence, your way of speaking that feels safe, wise, familiar. People find comfort in you, often without understanding why. Strangers tell you things they haven't shared with anyone. Friends look to you for guidance without needing you to fix anything, and you, for the most part, just speak from a place that doesn't feel like it belongs to your mind. It comes from somewhere deeper, somewhere ancient. You've likely noticed it yourself, that strange, effortless way you seem to just know things. Your logic might be unsure, your mind might hesitate, but your gut, your inner sense, your intuition, it speaks with clarity. It speaks without fear, and more often than not, when you follow it, you find that it was guiding you to exactly where you needed to be, even when the path didn't make sense on the surface. That inner wisdom you carry, it's not something you had to earn in this life, it's something you brought with you. It's not information you memorized, it's knowing you remembered. There's a reason you can sense when someone is lying without proof. There's a reason you can walk into a room and immediately feel the emotional temperature. There's a reason you sometimes open your mouth and truth pours out in a way that sounds more like a transmission than a conversation. This is what happens when the soul has lived long enough and deeply enough that it no longer needs external validation to speak with clarity. What you're experiencing is the echo of lifetimes. Lifetimes spent learning, failing, rising, falling, discovering spiritual truths not through doctrine, but through direct experience. You've sat in silence as a seeker. You've offered prayers under foreign stars. You've comforted children during war. You've held sacred space for grieving lovers, wounded friends, and broken strangers. You've lived the spectrum of the human experience, NET, and through all of that, you absorbed wisdom that goes beyond language. Now, it flows through you as intuition, as empathy, as guidance that surprises even you. You may not know all the spiritual terms. You may not have studied metaphysics or theology or sacred texts, but somehow, you understand them anyway. When you do read something spiritual, it doesn't feel like new information. It feels like remembering. It feels like a reflection of something you've always known in your bones, even if your mind can't explain how. That's the gift of a soul on its final life, she's noticed. It no longer seeks knowledge to prove anything. It simply resonates with truth, instantly, like a tuning fork that recognizes its own vibration in everything sacred. And that recognition is effortless. You might find yourself finishing people's sentences, knowing what they need before they say it, sensing the energy behind their words more than the words themselves. When others struggle to understand their emotions, you can feel it before they can name it. You may even feel their pain as if it were your own. And yet, when you speak to it, when you offer them insight or comfort, it doesn't feel forced. It feels like stepping into a familiar rhythm, like remembering a song your soul has always known. Some people call it being an old soul, but it's more than that. You're not just old, you're seasoned, you're alchemized, you've turned lifetimes of suffering into compassion, lifetimes of seeking into serenity. You've witnessed humanity from so many angles that now, in this life, you just see things more clearly. You no longer need to be convinced that there is more to this world than what the eyes can see. You already know, you've already seen. And what's most humbling about this wisdom is that you don't feel superior because of it. You don't walk around trying to prove your depth or parade your insights. In fact, you often wonder why people come to you at all. You see yourself as ordinary, but that humility, that quiet grace, is part of the wisdom itself. You're not here to impress, you're here to remind. And reminders don't shout, they whisper. You've learned, through lifetimes, that true guidance doesn't come from control. It comes from presence, from listening, from holding space, from saying just enough and never too much. You've learned how to step aside and let the truth speak for itself. You've learned that timing is sacred, that silence can be medicine, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. This is why you may feel a strange resistance to titles, dogmas, and spiritual hierarchies. You don't need a name for what you do. You don't need robes, rituals, or approval to trust your knowing. Because your authority doesn't come from this world, it comes from the journey your soul has taken through time. And in this life, that wisdom expresses not as performance, but as presence. You may also notice that you speak differently with different people, not because you're pretending, but because something within you intuitively adjusts to match what they need. You can be the mirror, the anchor, the bridge, the spark. It's not manipulation, it's a spiritual sensitivity, a soul-based responsiveness, and it's not something you can teach. It's something you embody. It's something that was earned, across lifetimes, and now simply is. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about this ancient wisdom is that you don't even have to speak for it to be felt. Your energy does the talking. your presence shifts the room. You walk in and the atmosphere changes, even if no one can name why. It's not about charisma, it's about vibration. You hold a frequency that reminds others of something their soul once knew too. This is why, in your presence, people soften. They breathe more deeply. They feel seen. Because even if they can't articulate it, they sense the stillness within you, the absence of judgment, the acceptance that only comes from having seen all of life and still choosing love. That is the mark of a soul that has lived enough lifetimes to no longer need to defend itself. So, if you've ever doubted your inner voice, if you've ever hesitated to share what's in your heart because you thought you weren't qualified, let this be your confirmation. You are the qualification. Your life, your lives, have been the training, and now your only job is to trust what already lives within you. You don't need permission to speak truth. You are truth remembering itself. And when you speak from that place, the world listens, not because it must, but because it recognizes you. There's a kind of tiredness you can't explain to anyone. It doesn't go away after a long night's sleep. It doesn't lift after a vacation. It lingers, silent, deep, ancient. You wake up feeling it. You carry it throughout the day like a soft weight in your chest, and no matter how well you eat, how much you rest, how much you try to fix it with routines or remedies, it stays. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something is ending. This isn't the tiredness of the body. It's not mental exhaustion from overthinking or emotional fatigue from too many heartbreaks. This is something more elusive. It's what could only be called soul tiredness. The kind of sacred weariness that comes from lifetimes upon lifetimes of experience. You may not remember all those lives in detail, but your soul does. It remembers the rise and fall, the love and loss, the laughter and pain, over and over again. You don't need to see the memories, you feel the residue. Sometimes it creeps in during moments when nothing is wrong at all. You might be sitting with a warm cup of tea, watching the light shift across your walls, and yet feel that quiet ache settle in. It's not sadness, it's not anxiety, it's a deep knowing that you've done this, all of this, before. The conversations, the ambitions, the celebrations, the setbacks. All the cycles of human experience are so familiar now that they no longer feel urgent, they feel complete. This kind of tiredness is not defeat, it's not despair. In fact, it carries within it a subtle dignity. Because what you're feeling is the weight of wisdom, the heaviness that comes when your soul has gathered every fragment of the human experience it came to learn. When you've felt every emotion, walked through every archetype, played every role, the seeker, the rebel, the healer, the wounded, there comes a moment when the soul begins to settle. And in that settling, it sighs. This sacred tiredness often shows up in how you relate to the world around you. Things that once excited you might now feel empty. Conversations that used to energize you may feel repetitive. You might notice that you no longer argue like you used to. Not because you don't care, but because something within you whispers, "We've fought this fight already." The urge to prove, to persuade, to control outcomes begins to dissolve. Not because you're giving up, but because your soul has found something more valuable than being right. It has found peace. This is the fatigue that follows a long journey, not the kind that demands a break, but the kind that signals completion. It's like reaching the top of a mountain and sitting down, not because you're out of strength, but because the view is finally enough. You're not trying to get anywhere anymore. You're not racing towards something undefined. You're resting in a knowing that you've done what you came here to do. People around you might not understand this shift. They might think you're unmotivated or disconnected. But in truth, your motivation has simply changed form. You're no longer driven by the need to prove yourself or to chase after external definitions of success. You're moved by something quieter, the desire to live in alignment, to walk gently, to speak truth without drama, to give without expectation. And even that giving is done without fanfare, because you no longer need applause to validate your presence here. This soul-level tiredness is not something to cure, it's something to honor. It's a message from the deepest part of you that you're reaching the end of your earthly curriculum, not in a morbid or tragic way, but in a celebratory, reverent way. like a student who's completed every course, passed every exam, and now sits waiting for the final bell to ring. There's pride in this kind of exhaustion, there's completion in it. You might notice that this tiredness coexists with a strange sense of peace, the same peace that comes after the storm has passed, after the lessons have been learned, after the karma has played out. You start seeing life with softer eyes. You become more forgiving, not just of others, but of yourself. You understand that everyone is playing their part, just like you did, over many lifetimes. And so you let go, not with resignation, but with grace. You no longer seek the intensity you once did. The highs and lows of emotional extremes don't call you like they used to. You'd rather feel steady than thrilled. You'd rather be centered than stimulated. Because your soul has had enough of the roller coaster. It's ready for the still waters. It doesn't want adrenaline anymore. It wants presence. And even in your relationships, you begin to choose differently. You no longer have the patience for games, drama, or emotional roller coasters. You crave authenticity, calm, and quiet depth. Your soul recognizes the souls it has danced with before, and it naturally gravitates toward those who carry a similar frequency, those who are also approaching the end of their earthly journey. You find comfort in their eyes, you find rest in their presence, because there is no need to explain. They feel it too. Sometimes, this sacred tiredness can make you question your place in the world. You might wonder why you feel so old inside, so detached from the ambitions that drive others. But that's not a flaw, it's a milestone. It's what happens when your spirit is preparing to merge back into a fuller awareness of itself. When it's nearing the point where it no longer needs to forget in order to grow, the amnesia that comes with incarnation is beginning to wear off. And what's left is remembrance, subtle, intuitive, but powerful. You may feel nostalgic for something you can't name, a kind of homesickness that isn't for a place, but for a state of being. That is the soul calling itself home. Not just home to the stars, or to some celestial realm, but home to its own essence. The longing is real. It's the echo of lifetimes, calling you back to wholeness, and that longing is carried in your tired bones, in your heavy breath, in your quiet eyes. This isn't a signal to withdraw from life. It's a call to participate differently, more consciously, more softly, to serve without sacrificing yourself, to love without losing yourself, to offer presence, not performance, because the soul in its final lifetime doesn't need to do more, it needs to be more. It needs to rest in its truth, and let that truth radiate out effortlessly. So if you've felt a tiredness that no rest can heal, if you've found yourself staring out of windows and feeling the weight of unseen lifetimes pressing gently on your chest, know this: you are not broken. You are not lost, you are arriving, and this exhaustion you carry is not a burden, it's a sign, a sacred one that says, your work here is nearly done. Your soul is not collapsing, it's completing, and that completion, though quiet, is the most profound achievement of all. There comes a moment in your life when the chase begins to lose its thrill. It's not that you've become apathetic or that you don't care. It's that something deeper inside you has started to awaken, something that recognizes the emptiness behind the game board of modern life. The achievements that once felt like milestones now feel hollow. The idea of competing to be better, faster, more successful, it all begins to feel like a performance you no longer wish to audition for. Not because you've given up, but because you've seen through it. You might find yourself sitting at a dinner table, surrounded by people laughing over gossip, obsessing over career moves, or arguing about who's right. And as you sit there, something within you quietly drifts. It's not boredom, it's not judgment, it's something more subtle. A sense that none of it matters in the way it once did. You may even smile and nod, but deep down, you know you're no longer part of the script, you've outgrown the act. And that's exactly what it feels like outgrowing a role you once played convincingly. You remember the times when recognition lit you up, when being the best, being chosen, being seen meant everything. There was a time when you chased dreams that were more about validation than purpose, and maybe, at that point in your journey, that was necessary. But now, it's different. Now, the applause doesn't echo the same way. The spotlight feels too hot. The trophies gather dust. You're not broken. You're evolving. There's a quiet kind of evolution that happens when the soul begins to mature beyond the illusions of this world. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, it's more like a gentle peeling away of layers. What once captivated your attention now passes by like a moving train you no longer feel the need to board. You stop needing to win arguments, not because you're afraid to engage, but because you no longer find worth in proving anything. You've learned that peace is more valuable than being right. That presence is more fulfilling than performance. You begin to notice that conversations centered around status, image, gossip, or petty competition start to feel foreign, not because you're better than anyone, but because your soul has outgrown those frequencies. You've danced in them for lifetimes, lived as the hero, the villain, the warrior, the lover, the leader. You've played every part in this play of human ambition, and now, your soul is ready for something different, something real, something eternal. The detachment you feel from Earth's games is not a sign of depression. It's not disinterest born of failure or fatigue. It's transcendence in motion. The soul no longer attaches to things that hold no true meaning. You see through the glitter now. You understand that success built on ego is always temporary, that arguments driven by pride are never worth the energy. That competition only reinforces the illusion of separation. You're not here to beat others. You're here to remember that there are no others, only reflections of yourself, playing out different expressions of the same source. When you start to feel like an outsider in spaces you once felt at home in, it can be disorienting. It's easy to mistake this shift for loneliness, but what's really happening is that you're coming home to yourself. The noise of the world no longer speaks your language. Your soul is seeking a different rhythm now, a quieter, deeper current that flows beneath the surface of everyday life. This is why you might find comfort in silence, why solitude feels more nourishing than social gatherings. You're not antisocial, you're recalibrating. You're shifting out of environments that reinforce the illusion and into spaces that allow you to feel what's real. It doesn't mean you stop showing up in the world, it just means you no longer lose yourself in it. You walk among it, but you're no longer of it. You've likely noticed that the things you now crave aren't flashy or grand. You long for authenticity, for connection that feels honest, for moments of stillness that soften your heart, for laughter that isn't at someone else's expense, for work that feels like an offering rather than a ladder to climb. These are the desires of a soul that remembers what truly matters. They are the quiet cravings of someone who no longer wants to win the game, but to rise above it. And make no mistake, this transition isn't always easy. You may question yourself. You may wonder if you've lost your ambition or your edge. You may grieve the old version of yourself who once found joy in those things, but in truth, you haven't lost anything. You've simply traded illusion for insight. You've chosen substance over surface, and in doing so, you've stepped into a deeper layer of freedom. This freedom doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need celebration. It moves like water, fluid, subtle, life-giving. You begin to live more gently. You make choices not to impress, but to align. You care less about being seen and more about seeing clearly. You let go of the constant need to be doing, and begin to find meaning in simply being. Not because you're lazy, but because you understand that rest is sacred. That productivity without purpose is just another trick of the ego. You've seen what the world worships, the accolades, the applause, the hierarchy of worth, and you've quietly walked away, not in anger, not in defiance, but in peace. You've outgrown Earth's games, and now you're here not to play by the rules, but to embody a different truth. This doesn't mean you disconnect from the world. In fact, you may serve it more deeply now than ever before. But your service isn't fueled by needing to prove anything. It's fueled by love, by clarity, by devotion to something greater than the illusion of success. You may create, you may lead, you may still achieve, but you do so from a place that doesn't need the outcome to define you, because you already know who you are. You are not the role you play, you are not the score you keep, you are not the identity the world projects onto you. You are the stillness beneath it all, the awareness watching the game unfold. And once you see the game for what it is, you can finally choose whether or not to play. And in that choice, there is power, there is peace. So, if you've found yourself disenchanted with what once inspired you, if you feel yourself withdrawing from the noise, the chase, the endless striving, if you've stopped needing the things that used to validate your worth, this is your soul speaking. It's not a sign of regression, it's a sign of return. Return to yourself. Return to the truth. Return to the knowing that you were never here to win. You were here to wake up, and now, you are. There comes a moment in your evolution when your heart opens in a way that you can't explain. It doesn't happen all at once, 19D. It unfolds slowly, like petals in sunlight. And when it does, you start to feel everything more deeply. A story on the news makes your eyes fill with tears. A stranger's pain stirs something tender in you. A wounded animal limping across the street pulls something ancient out of your chest, a quiet ache, a sacred grief. You don't know why you feel so much, but you do. You feel it all, and not just for yourself, but for everyone. This kind of compassion doesn't come from effort. You didn't decide to become softer, more open, or more sensitive. You didn't read it in a book or practice it in a workshop. It simply emerged, like a memory waking up inside you. You've lived enough lives to know what pain feels like. You've worn every mask. You've stood on both sides of every wound. And so, when you see someone hurting, something in you whispers, "I know that. I've been there." That recognition creates a bridge, not of sympathy, but of soul-level empathy. You no longer judge as quickly as you once did. You no longer rush to label people good or bad, right or wrong. You still see injustice, you still feel disappointment, but your heart has learned to look beyond the surface. When someone lashes out at you, instead of reacting with anger, your first instinct is to pause, to wonder what kind of pain they must be carrying to behave that way. What wounds must still be unhealed? What fear is hiding beneath their words? This isn't weakness, it's awareness. There's a moment when you realize you can't truly hate anyone anymore, not because you approve of their behavior, but because you see the child behind the cruelty, you see the trauma behind the aggression, you see the soul behind the mask. And when you see from that depth, hatred has no place to land. What replaces it is something quieter, something that feels like divine sadness. Not pity, not superiority, but a sorrow that understands the long road of forgetting. You feel this most acutely in silence. When no one is around, and your heart expands beyond the boundaries of your own story, you start to feel the weight of the world. Not in a way that crushes you, but in a way that awakens you. You carry tears that aren't entirely yours. You carry grief that didn't begin in this lifetime. You carry a knowing that suffering is universal, not compassion, is not optional, but inevitable. Sometimes, this makes you feel fragile. You might wonder why you seem to carry more emotion than those around you. Why their pain becomes your pain. Why a single image can linger in your chest for hours, even days. But this isn't fragility. This is your soul remembering its unity with all things. It's not just emotional sensitivity, it's spiritual maturity. The heart that breaks easily is the heart that's finally learned how to stay open. You don't need people to deserve your compassion anymore. You don't require explanations, apologies, or conditions. Your love isn't transactional, it's natural. It flows from a place beyond reason. Because the old soul doesn't love from identity, it loves from recognition. And when you recognize the divine in someone, even when they've forgotten it in themselves, your response isn't rage. It's reverence. Even in the face of betrayal, your soul whispers, "They're still learning," and you forgive, not to free them, but to free yourself. This doesn't mean you allow abuse. It doesn't mean you let others walk over you. That's not compassion. That's self-neglect. What it means is that even as you draw boundaries, you do it with love. You protect your peace, not out of anger, but out of respect, both for yourself and for others, because you understand that compassion without self-respect is not compassion at all. It's codependence, and your soul has evolved past that stage. The more you live from this place, the more you start to feel connected to everything. A tree isn't just a tree anymore. It becomes a witness. A dog's eyes carry the weight of lifetimes. A stranger's smile feels like an echo of someone you once knew. You begin to feel the interconnectedness of all beings, and that knowing changes how you walk in the world. You move with more gentleness. You speak with more kindness. You listen with more presence. Not because you're trying to be a better person, but because your soul has dropped the armor it once needed. And in those quiet moments, when the world is still and your heart is wide open, you feel the presence of something vast moving through you. A love that doesn't belong to you, but flows through you. It's not personal, it's cosmic. It's the force that keeps the stars burning and the oceans rising. It's the love that holds the suffering of the world without turning away, and in those moments, you realize that love is who you are. You may find yourself drawn to help in ways that feel subtle. You're not trying to save people, you're simply trying to remind them that they're not alone. You don't need credit, you don't need recognition. You just want to ease the burden, even if it's just by holding space, by listening, by offering a word of comfort at the right time. That's how an old soul loves. Quietly, consistently, without needing to be seen. You might find yourself crying at moments that surprise you, a commercial, a song, a child laughing, a stranger helping another stranger. These aren't emotional outbursts, they're sacred releases. The soul weeping in recognition of beauty, or in mourning for what's been forgotten. This level of feeling isn't a sign that something is wrong, it's a sign that everything is finally becoming right. You're no longer numb, you're no longer closed. You're alive in a way that only deep compassion can bring. And yes, it's overwhelming at times. You'll have to learn how to protect your energy. You'll have to create space for stillness, for solitude, for recalibration. Because carrying this kind of open heart in a world still learning how to love is no small task. But the beauty is, you're not alone. There are others like you. Other souls who feel deeply, who walk quietly, who serve without a spotlight. And you'll find each other, sometimes without words. Just a glance, just a knowing. What you're experiencing is not an accident, it's a sign, a sacred indicator that your soul is nearing completion. You've moved past resentment, past revenge, past judgment. What's left is recognition, too, and love. Not the romantic kind, not the conditional kind, but the kind that simply is, a love that stays even when others leave. A love that forgives even when it's not asked to. A love that recognizes the light in someone even when they're lost in the dark. So, if you've felt too much lately, if your heart aches for the world, if you find yourself crying for reasons you can't explain, know that you're not broken. You're not too soft, you're not too emotional, you're awake, you're remembering, you're living from the wisdom of many lifetimes, and that compassion you carry, that softness, it's not your weakness, it's your power. There's a kind of nostalgia that doesn't come from childhood memories or photos tucked away in an old box. It doesn't come from songs you used to play, places you used to visit, or people you used to know. This kind of nostalgia is different. It arrives like a breeze through the soul, sudden, familiar, and impossible to explain. You could be walking down a street you've never been on, and suddenly you feel it, that tug in your chest. A strange sense of longing, as if some part of you recognizes the land beneath your feet, the sound of the wind, the colors in the sky. Your mind says, "This is new," but something older within you whispers, "I've been here before." You may have felt it while standing in an ancient ruin, brushing your fingers across old stone, or hearing a language spoken in a crowded market that you don't consciously know but somehow understand. Maybe it's the smell of burning wood, or the sight of mountains in the distance, or the call of birds at dawn. These moments strike you with emotion you can't place, a sense of home in places your passport has never touched, and still, you feel as though you left something there long ago, or maybe even someone, and now, the memory returns, not to your mind, but to your soul. This is the strange and beautiful experience of remembering what you've never lived, a sacred recall of lifetimes that didn't happen in this current body, but are etched deep into the essence of who you are. Because you are not new, you are not inexperienced. You are a soul that has walked across centuries and civilizations, spoken different tongues, held different names, and witnessed 1,000 sunrises through 1,000 sets of eyes. And although the veil of forgetting is part of this incarnation, it's thinner than you think. It lifts in dreams, in silence, in certain moments of awe or heartbreak, and through those thin places, the memory leaks in. Have you ever woken up from a dream that felt more vivid than anything you've seen while awake? A dream that leaves you disoriented, not because it was strange, but because it felt too real, like a glimpse into a life that isn't yours, yet belongs to you. You see faces you know but can't name. You walk through homes you've never owned. You feel emotions tied to events you have no recollection of, and when you wake, you carry a piece of it with you, not as fantasy, but as a residue. These aren't just dreams. These are echoes, portals, flashbacks of the soul. Sometimes, this remembering shows up as déjà vu, that eerie moment when everything aligns, the place, the smell, the sentence someone speaks, and suddenly you're suspended in time. You know what's going to happen next, and you feel, inexplicably, that you've been there before, but not in this lifetime, not in this body. It's like a glitch in the matrix, but more than that, it's a message from your soul saying, this isn't your first time here. It's a glimpse behind the curtain of linear time, a crack in the illusion. And even though it only lasts a second, it leaves you with a knowing you can't explain and don't need to. There's also a reason you're drawn to specific cultures, music, philosophies, or historical periods. You might feel magnetically pulled to ancient Egypt, to Himalayan temples, to the rituals of indigenous tribes, or to the lost cities of South America. You might feel a profound respect for languages you've never learned, or find yourself deeply connected to art, symbols, or music that feel like part of your internal architecture. You don't know why, but they stir something in you. They make your chest ache, and your eyes fill with tears. That's not coincidence, that's memory. What you're experiencing is soul recognition, fragments of your own eternal being returning to your conscious awareness. These fragments don't speak through logic or intellect, they speak through sensation, through unprovoked emotion, through the sudden presence of a story you didn't realize was yours. And the more open you are to these experiences, the more often they will occur. They're not here to confuse you, they're here to affirm you, to remind you that your journey didn't begin at birth and won't end with death. This sense of already knowing that pulses through your life isn't arrogance, it's not a delusion, it's truth. When you hear someone talk about a spiritual concept you've never heard before but immediately resonate with, that's remembering. When you meet someone for the first time and feel like you've known them forever, that's remembering. When you're able to comfort someone through a pain you've never experienced firsthand, and the words come out of you like scripture, that's remembering. Your soul is pulling from a library of experience far vaster than the confines of this one existence. This is why you don't need to be taught the deepest truths. When you hear them, they ignite something inside you. You don't analyze them, you absorb them. They awaken you, they calm you. Because the soul doesn't learn the way the mind does, it recognizes, it reclaims. And this is the beauty of being in your final life. The remembering intensifies, the veil thins. You're not here to gather more experiences for the sake of growth, you're here to consolidate wisdom, to walk as a whole being. You may find yourself uninterested in following trends, in copying others, in seeking answers outside yourself. Not because you think you know everything, but because something in you whispers, you've already lived that path. And so, you walk your own, even if it doesn't look like anyone else's. Sometimes, the remembering will come through grief. You may mourn people you've never met, or cry over tragedies that seem distant or unrelated, but your tears are real. They carry the pain of lifetimes you can't name but still feel. You're not oversensitive. You're not too emotional. You're attuned. You've seen too much to pretend it doesn't matter. You may also feel disoriented at times, unsure why you're here or what you're meant to do. That's not confusion, that's clarity trying to break through the noise. You've already done so much. You've been the seeker, the teacher, the warrior, the monk. And now, this life is not about building from scratch, it's about remembering who you already are. And once you remember, your presence becomes the offering. You no longer need to prove your worth through doing. You radiate it, through being. So, if you feel like you're carrying memories without context, if you long for places you've never seen, if your dreams feel like lost chapters of a book you once wrote, know that you're not lost. You're remembering, you're returning, your soul is piecing itself back together, whisper by whisper, moment by moment, and in those moments, trust yourself, even when you can't explain it, even when no one else understands it, because the soul doesn't speak in facts or timelines, it speaks in symbols, in senses, in a quiet knowing that lives beyond language. You are not imagining these connections. You are remembering your own eternity. There's something strange about the way you experience time now. It's not like it used to be. It doesn't feel as rigid, as structured, as absolute. You find yourself no longer rushing the way others do. You move slower, but not because you're lazy or distracted. It's something deeper. You've started to observe time, not chase it. While people around you live by the clock, ruled by deadlines and calendars and urgent schedules, something in you has stepped back from it all. You watch life unfolding rather than trying to control its pace. You're still in the world, still moving through it, but it's like you've begun to float just slightly outside of its tempo. This isn't something you chose. It wasn't the result of a productivity hack or a new mindfulness app. It just happened. One day, you realized that minutes and hours didn't feel as real as they used to. The urgency that once ran through your body like electricity has gone quiet. You don't fear being late like you used to. You don't pack your days as tightly. You no longer believe that every second must be maximized to prove your worth. You've started to experience the gaps between things, the sacred pauses that most people rush past. And, in those pauses, you've discovered something extraordinary. Time isn't what you thought it was. Sometimes, you'll be in the middle of something simple, folding clothes, washing a dish, sitting by a window, and suddenly, the moment stretches. Everything feels slower, deeper, more vibrant. You feel like you're floating in a stillness that has no beginning or end. These aren't moments of zoning out, they're moments of awakening. It's as if your soul is remembering that the ticking of the clock is only a symbol, not a truth. That linear time, past, present, future, is just one way of organizing experience, and your spirit is beginning to slip beyond that structure. You might find yourself disoriented by this at first. You lose track of days. You forget what time it is. You go to check the clock and realize it doesn't really matter. There's a quiet rebellion happening inside you, not against society, but against illusion. You're waking up from the trance that says time is scarce, that moments are slipping away, that you have to run faster to catch up, because the soul in its final life knows that there is nowhere to get to. Nothing is being missed. All that matters is this breath, this presence, this now. You've likely already experienced moments that feel eternal, not because they lasted a long time in hours, but because something in them opened you. A conversation that felt like lifetimes in a single evening. A walk where the sky, the air, and the silence spoke to you in ways words never could. A moment of stillness where time seemed to stop altogether, and you felt suspended in something infinite. That's not your imagination. That's your consciousness slipping into timelessness. That's your soul remembering its origin. The more this happens, the less interested you become in measuring your life in years. Birthdays feel different. Milestones don't hold the same weight. You no longer compare yourself to timelines. You don't feel behind, even if others say you should. You know, deeply, wordlessly, that your path isn't linear. It never was. You've moved through too many incarnations, touched too many layers of existence, to be confined by a simple line from beginning to end. You're walking a spiral, not a straight road. And every step you take is both a return and a departure. There's also a strange sense of déjà vu that lingers more often now. You might walk into a room and feel like you've been there before, not in this lifetime, but somewhere deeper. You meet someone and sense that your souls have met long ago. These aren't just tricks of the mind. They're echoes of the soul, reminders that you exist across multiple layers of time at once. And as your journey nears completion, your awareness of those layers becomes more fluid. You no longer see time as a line, but as a field something you move through, something you touch, something that bends with your awareness. And then there are the quiet hours, the early mornings before the world wakes up, or the late nights when everything falls silent. You may feel pulled to those moments more often now. Not because you're trying to escape, but because that's when time loosens its grip. That's when the veil thins and you can feel your eternal nature most clearly. In those hours, you're not a role. You're not a name, you're not a task list, you're just being. And that beingness is where your true power lives. People may not understand this shift in you. They might think you've lost your drive or become too passive. But the truth is, you've simply moved into a different rhythm, one that doesn't seek to dominate life, but to dance with it. You no longer chase time like a predator. You welcome it like a friend. You listen to it. You let it speak to you, not just rush past you. And in that listening, you begin to live more fully than ever before. There's a grace that comes with this transformation. You stop judging the past so harshly. You stop fearing the future so deeply. You realize that everything unfolds exactly as it should, in its own time. Not because fate is fixed, but because your soul trusts the unfolding. You begin to understand that even the waiting serves a purpose. Even the delays are part of the orchestration. You are no longer trying to force the bloom, you're honoring the seasons. And in that honoring, you become more present. You start to notice things you never did before. The way light dances through the trees, the texture of the air after rain, the way someone's voice trembles when they're being vulnerable. These moments become your currency. They become the markers of a life well lived, not the trophies, not the accomplishments, but the awareness, the presence, the depth. You might even begin to feel that time isn't moving you, you are moving time. That your consciousness shapes the flow of reality more than you ever realized. When you're aligned, time stretches. When you're disconnected, it contracts. You're learning how to enter the flow deliberately, how to move from the timeless space within you, rather than reacting to the artificial tempo of the world. And in doing so, you align with the rhythm of the soul, IT7, which is never rushed, never late, never lost. So, if you've been feeling different lately, if you find yourself no longer driven by the clock, no longer stressed by the ticking hands, no longer afraid of getting older or being too late, trust that. Trust that your soul is stepping into a higher understanding. You're not lazy, you're not behind, you're expanding, you're awakening to a deeper truth, that the essence of who you are has always existed beyond time. And as you continue to live from this place, you'll begin to realize that the moments of your life are not slipping through your fingers, they're blooming within you. And every time you stop to feel one, to really feel it, you're not wasting time, you're stepping outside of it, into the eternal, into the sacred, into the now, where your soul has always belonged. There's a quiet shift that happens when your soul reaches a certain stage in its evolution. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks, it doesn't need a ceremony or a sign from the sky. It just settles into you, like a deep breath at the end of a long journey. You look around at the world and realize you no longer feel the same pull. The things that once consumed your energy, the patterns, the drama, the inner battles, they no longer hold weight. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've finally seen through them. You've walked those paths before, you've studied those lessons, and now, Earth feels less like a classroom, and more like a place you've returned to, not to learn, but to be. It's a subtle but profound difference. You watch people around you struggle through their experiences, chasing love, power, validation, trying to win the approval of others, or desperately searching for something to fill the void. You recognize their pain, you empathize with their confusion, but at the same time, something within you doesn't get pulled into it. Not anymore. It's like seeing a storm through a window. You've stood in that rain before. You've been soaked, you've shivered, you've screamed into the wind, and now, you simply understand the weather for what it is, temporary, necessary, but no longer yours to walk through. You've likely felt this in relationships too. The cycles you once repeated with different faces no longer replay. The triggers that once haunted you now feel faint, like echoes. The arguments you used to get tangled in now fall flat before they begin. You're not disinterested because you're cold or detached. You're disinterested because your soul has moved beyond those dynamics. They don't feed your spirit. They don't grow you anymore. You've already learned what they came to teach. This doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean you don't still feel, or struggle, or fall into old habits from time to time. It simply means the core lessons, Mona, the karmic knots, the soul-level contracts, the recurring challenges, Mona, they've run their course. And now, instead of being a student, you're something else entirely. You're a presence, a witness, a vessel. You've probably felt it in quiet moments, that strange sense of being done, not in a hopeless way, not in surrender to exhaustion, but in a kind of sacred completion, like finishing a book that changed you and knowing there's no need to read it again. You're grateful for every chapter. You honor every twist and turn. But now, you're ready to close the cover, not because you're rushing toward something new, but because you've received what you came for. And yet, you're still here. That's important to understand. You're still breathing, still living, still walking through this world. So what now? If you're not here to learn anymore, what is your purpose? The answer doesn't come with grand missions or loud declarations. It comes quietly. It whispers. You're here now not to master more lessons, but to be a gentle presence for those still in the classroom. You're here to hold space, to embody what you've become, to live in a way that reminds others they're not alone. You don't need to preach, teach, or fix. You simply are. And in your being, you offer an energetic permission slip for others to rise. There's a power in this stage of the journey, a silent authority. You don't have to convince anyone of your path. You don't need recognition or applause. You radiate something that words can't carry. It's in your eyes, in the way you listen, in the way you don't react, in the way you smile, not because everything is perfect, but because you've made peace with what is. You may find yourself drawn to places of stillness. You may crave solitude more than social scenes. You may find fulfillment not in doing more, but in being more fully present. These aren't signs of withdrawal. They're signs of deep alignment. Your energy no longer chases. It rests. It flows. And that flow is healing, not just for you, but for those who come into contact with you. Sometimes, this can feel isolating. It can be hard to explain why you don't relate to certain things anymore. Friends might not understand why you don't engage in gossip or drama. Family might wonder why you no longer react to the things that once triggered you. And while it can feel lonely at times, that loneliness is not a punishment. It's a clearing, a space being made for something more expansive to move through you. You may even look back on your life and see the patterns now, with incredible clarity. You'll see how every challenge was a classroom, every heartbreak, a teacher, every mistake, a mirror. And you'll see how you, over time, became softer, not weaker, but wiser, not smaller, but more rooted. The rage became compassion, the fear became faith, the noise became silence. And in that silence, you found something rare, truth. This truth isn't loud, it doesn't seek followers, it simply lives in your bones, it lives in your breath. It lives in the way you meet the world now, without defense, without grasping, without needing to be anything other than what you are. And in that truth, you serve. Not by trying to be useful, but by being real. That's all. That's enough. And so, you continue on. Not as a seeker, but as one who has found. Not as someone trying to figure it all out, but as someone who understands that there's nothing to figure out. Life will unfold, as it must. People will awaken when they're ready. The world will spin and the seasons will change. And through it all, you will remain grounded, anchored in something eternal. There's a peace that comes from this stage of the soul's journey. A peace that doesn't depend on external conditions. You can walk through chaos and still carry calm. You can witness pain without being consumed by it. You can love without clinging. You can serve without losing yourself. Because you're not here to fix the world. You're here to be in it, fully, presently, lovingly. And in that presence, you become a lighthouse. You don't chase ships. You don't move for attention. You stand where you are, shining. And those who are ready, those who are seeking, will find you, not because you called to them, but because your light reminded them of something they already carried within. So, if you feel like Earth has become a classroom you no longer need to sit in, trust that. If you feel done with the lessons, the cycles, the striving, trust that too. You're not escaping. You're not giving up. You're simply standing at the edge of the final page, holding a lifetime's worth of wisdom in your heart, and realizing that the most powerful thing you can do now is simply live that truth, fully, quietly, and without apology. There's a kind of quiet that calls to you now. Not the kind that comes from isolation or emptiness, but the kind that feels like home. It's a silence that doesn't scare you, it soothes you. You find yourself drawn to places where the world softens, where the wind hums through the trees, where the sky stretches wide and open, where no one expects anything from you. These moments, simple and unassuming, feel sacred. You don't crave the noise anymore. You don't need the buzz of activity or the constant hum of voices to feel alive. In fact, it's in the absence of all that where you feel most awake. You've likely noticed this shift gradually. Once, maybe, you thrived in social gatherings, in conversations that never stopped, in calendars packed with plans. But now, that same energy feels overwhelming, draining. You might step into a crowded room and feel your spirit slowly pull back. Not out of fear, but because your soul is seeking something quieter, deeper, more real. There's nothing wrong with the people or the noise, it's just that your frequency has changed. You've begun turning inward, and that inner world has become more nourishing than anything external. This isn't loneliness. It's not about being cut off or left out. It's a fullness that arises when you're alone, not because something's missing, but because everything is present. You don't feel the need to fill the silence anymore. You let it stretch. You let it breathe. You've come to trust the language of stillness, silhouettes, the way it speaks in subtleties, in gentle nudges, in wordless understandings, and in that silence, you begin to hear things you couldn't before, not with your ears, but with your soul. You might find yourself craving nature more than ever. The trees don't talk too much. The river doesn't ask for small talk. The mountains don't expect you to perform. In these places, you feel received, held, recognized. The natural world doesn't demand your story, your credentials, or your charm. It simply welcomes your presence. And in return, it reflects your own presence back to you. That's why it feels so holy, because you remember yourself there. In this stage of your soul's journey, energy becomes a language, and you start to notice how different environments speak to your energy. Some places lift you, others deplete you. Some people feel like medicine, others feel like noise. It's not about judgment, it's about resonance. And when you've walked through many lifetimes, your soul becomes less interested in fitting in and more interested in tuning in. You become selective with your energy, not because you're better than anyone, but because you've learned how precious that energy is. You've learned that not every space deserves your light. There's a sacred selfishness to this that's often misunderstood. You may hear people say, "You're too quiet lately," or "Why don't you come out more?" But what they don't see is that in your silence, you're doing the deepest work. You're communing with your own being. You're reconnecting with Source. And that kind of communion doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need to be broadcast, it just is. When your soul has reached a certain level of completion, it naturally begins to return to stillness. Not because it's retreating from life, but because it's aligning with something more eternal than noise. You start to find meaning in the pauses. A quiet morning, a long walk, a single candle glowing in a dark room. You notice how full emptiness can be, how deeply you can feel without a single word being spoken. You become intimate with the space between things, the space between thoughts, the space between breaths, and it's in that space where something ancient stirs inside you, a remembering that you were never the roles you played, that you were never the noise, you were the awareness beneath it all. As this shift deepens, you become more intentional with your relationships. You no longer surround yourself with people out of obligation. You don't keep conversations alive just to avoid silence. You'd rather be alone than be around energy that doesn't feel true. And yet, when you do connect with someone who carries that same quiet wisdom, the bond is immediate. effortless. There's no need for performance, just presence. And that kind of connection, rare as it may be, nourishes you more than 1,000 surface-level interactions ever could. This inward turn isn't about escape, it's about alignment. You're not avoiding life, you're immersing yourself in it more fully than ever before. Not in the way the world defines living, constant motion, endless stimulation, always on, but in a deeper way. You're learning how to sit in your own presence without needing to run from it. You're discovering that the most profound experiences often happen in silence. The revelations, the healings, the downloads from spirit, they come when you're quiet enough to receive them. And sometimes, in the quiet, you'll feel a presence that isn't just your own. It's subtle, but unmistakable, a sense that something vast and loving is with you, watching, guiding, holding. You may not have words for it, but you know it's real. And in those moments, you realize that solitude was never solitude at all. It was an invitation, a doorway, a return. You're not alone in this shift. More and more souls are waking up to the beauty of solitude, to the medicine of silence. There's a global remembering happening, a call back to essence. And even though the world may still praise the loud, the busy, the visible, you no longer need that praise, because you've tasted something richer. You've touched the infinite in a moment of stillness, and now nothing else compares. So if you've been craving more time alone, if you find yourself pulling back from the noise, the social obligations, the endless doing, trust that. You're not disappearing. You're reappearing in your truest form. You're not rejecting life. You're embracing it in a way that only the soul understands, a way that honors the depth of your journey, the weight of your wisdom, and the quiet majesty of your presence. You are not antisocial, you are not broken, you are not lost, you are realigning. Your energy is turning inward, back toward the infinite source it came from. And in that turning, you are becoming whole again, not through noise, not through crowds, but through the sacred silence that lives in the center of your being. That silence isn't empty, it's full of everything real, and in that silence, you'll find the voice of your own soul, clear, steady, eternal. There's something stirring inside you that doesn't quite have a name. You may not be able to put it into words, but you feel it, a quiet pull, a persistent whisper that says, you're here for something. Not just to exist, not just to survive, but to contribute something meaningful, something lasting, something sacred. And yet, when you try to explain what that something is, you come up blank. You're not confused, you're not lost, but the path you're walking isn't outlined on a map. It's carved in the unseen, lit by an inner knowing that transcends language. It's like carrying a sealed letter within you, one that you haven't read but are still somehow delivering. Your life has become the message, even if you don't fully understand the content. And that's part of the mystery. You don't need to know the entire mission to be aligned with it. You don't need to articulate it to live it, because it's not about doctrine. It's not about teaching in the traditional sense. It's about being. You walk into rooms, and your presence shifts the energy. You have conversations, and people leave feeling lighter. You exist, and somehow, without trying, you bring clarity where there was confusion, peace where there was restlessness, light where there was fear. This isn't ego. It's not about feeling special. It's the quiet awareness that your life is no longer just your own. You've lived for yourself before, many times. You've tasted the highs and lows of personal ambition, of survival, of romance, of rebellion, of discovery. You've followed countless desires and wrestled with countless fears. But this life, this one feels different. This life feels like a culmination, like a final offering. And that offering isn't flashy, it's subtle, invisible even, but no less important. You may have noticed you're not chasing purpose like others are. While many around you are trying to figure out what they're meant to do, you've settled into a quieter rhythm. You're not so much doing as you are becoming. You're not racing towards success. You're not seeking validation. You're not interested in building empires. Instead, you find yourself more focused on healing, on presence, on small moments that feel infinite in their depth. You're drawn to authenticity, to kindness, to truth, it. Not the loud kind, but the kind that lives in eye contact, in silence, in the soft way you hold space for someone else's pain. At times, this path can feel isolating. Because while others are chasing clarity through productivity or status, you're living in the liminal space, not that sacred in-between, where the mission isn't something you do, but something you are. It's not a job title. It's not a career path. It's not even a creative project. It's your vibration. It's the frequency you carry. It's the way your soul touches the world just by moving through it. And because it's so subtle, you might wonder if it's real. You might question whether you're doing enough, but your soul knows. It always knows. Sometimes, this mission shows up in small, unexpected ways. A conversation with a stranger that changes their life, even if you never know it. A decision to forgive someone, which creates ripples in the collective energy of your lineage. A moment of self-restraint, when you choose love over pride, and in doing so, collapse another karmic cycle. These acts may never be seen, they may never be recognized, but they are the legacy of a soul who is no longer trying to accumulate anything, not karma, not recognition, not power, a soul that is simply giving back. Because you've taken so much from this world across lifetimes, knowledge, experiences, relationships, heartbreaks, wisdom, growth. You've received the full spectrum, and now, in this final incarnation, you're not here to take, you're here to give. Not in the exhausting way of self-sacrifice, but in the radiant way of embodiment. You're not trying to be a light worker, you just are light. You're not trying to be wise, you just carry wisdom. You're not trying to be a healer. But when others are in your presence, they begin to soften, because your energy gives them permission to feel safe, perhaps for the first time in a very long time. And still, you may feel the tension of not knowing. You may wake up some days wondering, what am I really here to do? And that's okay, that's part of the design. The mind wants a blueprint, it wants clarity. But the soul is fluent in mystery. It knows that your purpose unfolds in real time, that every moment you choose love over fear, presence over distraction, compassion over control, you are fulfilling your mission. Not in grand gestures, but in micro movements of consciousness. It's easy to forget that embodiment is the highest form of teaching, that living your truth is more powerful than preaching it, that walking with grace is more transformative than shouting from rooftops. You've likely learned this through experience, that words can inspire, but presence transmits, that who you are matters more than what you say. This is the quiet revolution of the soul in its final life. It no longer needs to convince. It simply becomes. And yet, despite this soft presence, there is fire in you too. A deep sense of urgency. Not the panic of the unawakened, but the call of one who knows that time is precious. That each day is an opportunity to realign, to remember, to return. You don't want to waste it. You don't want to sleepwalk through it. You want to make it count, not by force, but by fully showing up, by being intentional with your energy, by choosing love again and again and again. You may also sense that your mission isn't about personal gain, it's collective, an energetic contribution to the evolution of humanity. You're here to anchor a higher frequency, to hold a vibration of truth so steady that others can rise into it. Not because you're trying to save them, but because when one person remembers, it creates a ripple effect, and your remembering becomes a catalyst. There will be days you feel weary, days you wonder if it's working, days when your sensitivity feels like too much. But those are the days your soul is doing its deepest work, holding light in a world that sometimes forgets it exists. And in those moments, it's not about pushing through, it's about returning to center, about trusting the mission even when you don't understand it, especially then. Because this is what it means to walk the path of the final life. You carry a purpose too vast for words. You live as a message you may never fully hear yourself. And yet, every breath you take is part of the transmission. Every moment of presence is a prayer. Every act of love is an offering. You may never know the full impact of your existence, but your soul does. And it smiles every time you remember that you are the mission. You always have been. There comes a point on the spiritual path when death stops feeling like something distant, terrifying, or final. It's not a dramatic realization. It doesn't come with fireworks or existential crisis. It arrives quietly, like a soft truth you always knew, just waiting for you to remember. One day, you notice the fear is gone. Not numbed, not avoided, simply gone. Where there was once dread, now there's curiosity. Where there was once resistance, now there's readiness. Not in a hopeless way, but in the way an old traveler feels when they know the journey is coming to a close. There's no rush, just a sense that whenever the train comes, you'll be ready to board. You don't spend your time thinking about death. It's not an obsession, but you no longer flinch when it's mentioned. You no longer recoil when someone you love crosses over. You feel their absence, of course. You grieve, you ache, but there's something else that moves beneath the grief, a knowing, a quiet understanding that no one is ever really gone, that what you are can never be ended by something as ordinary as death. This is one of the most sacred signs that your soul has nearly completed its journey here. You've lived through enough lifetimes to know that endings aren't endings at all. They're thresholds, transitions, sacred moments of return. You've died before. Maybe not in this body, but in others. And somewhere deep inside, your soul remembers what it felt like to release the physical form, to lift out of the density of flesh, to become light again. And it remembers that it wasn't tragic, it was freeing. You've come to see death not as an interruption, but as a completion, a homecoming. You no longer need to cling to this reality as if it's the only one that matters. You still cherish life. You still feel awe when the sun breaks through the clouds, when a child laughs, when music moves through your body. But there's no more desperation in your joy. You're not grasping at moments, trying to trap them before they slip away. You know they're meant to slip. That's what makes them beautiful. There's a softness that begins to form around your heart as you come into peace with endings. It shows up in how you let go of relationships that no longer serve you, in how you allow old versions of yourself to die without holding a funeral, in how you say goodbye to places, people, and chapters with gratitude instead of resistance. This isn't apathy, it's reverence. You're not pushing life away, you're walking with it, hand in hand, even as it changes form. This quiet readiness doesn't mean you want to die. It doesn't mean you've given up on life. It means you've stopped pretending that death is the opposite of living. You've stopped seeing it as a punishment or failure. You've stopped believing it's something to be feared or delayed at all costs. You've made peace with the truth that all forms are temporary, even this one. And in that peace, you've found a freedom that the world can't give or take away. You've likely had moments where you felt yourself dissolve, not physically, but spiritually. Maybe in deep meditation, or during an intense moment of surrender, or in the presence of someone passing. For a few seconds, the veil lifted. You felt yourself expand beyond your body, beyond your story, beyond time. And in that moment, you didn't panic. You felt home. You remembered what you are. And since then, nothing has been quite the same. You start to live differently when you stop fearing death. You become more present, more honest. You say what needs to be said. You stop wasting time. You stop pretending. Because you know every breath is a gift, not because it might be your last, but because it's one more opportunity to remember who you are. When death is no longer an enemy, life becomes sacred again. Not because it's rare, but because it's real. And you begin to see that most of the world is still running from this truth. You watch people trying to immortalize themselves through status, legacy, youth, control. And you don't judge them. You understand, you were once there too. But now, you know that the soul doesn't need monuments. It doesn't fear aging. It doesn't cling to this form. It has always known that life continues far beyond this body, this identity, this incarnation. Even your dreams begin to change. You may have visions of floating, of flying, of stepping through veils or crossing thresholds. These aren't just dreams, they're messages from your deeper self. Reminders, invitations. Your soul is preparing itself gently and lovingly to return. And you're not resisting, you're not dramatizing, you're simply allowing that truth to settle into your bones. When others talk about death with fear, you may find yourself responding with compassion, not correction, because you know it's not your job to convince anyone, it's your job to embody what you've remembered. And in doing so, you become a presence of peace. People may not even realize why they feel calmer around you, but it's because your energy no longer clings. It no longer fears loss. It has returned to its original rhythm. And maybe the most beautiful thing is this. Even though you've made peace with death, you've never loved life more. Not in the frantic, grasping way, but in the quiet, reverent way. You stop taking things for granted. You see the divine in the mundane. A breeze becomes a blessing. A glance becomes a gift. Every moment becomes a miracle, not because it will end, but because it is eternal in its essence. You don't need guarantees anymore. You don't need to know what happens after this. You feel it. You are it. And that feeling is enough. You walk through your days like someone who has already returned home. Not to a place, but to a truth that says, nothing is ever really lost, nothing is ever truly gone, everything transforms, everything continues, and what you are, what you really are, is unbreakable, unending, and free. So, if death no longer frightens you, if you've stopped running from the thought of endings, if your heart feels more curious than afraid when you imagine what comes next, know this, your soul is remembering. You're not being reckless, you're not being dark, you're being honest, you're being whole. This isn't the numbness of someone who's given up. This is the wisdom of someone who's woken up. You are not counting your days, you are making your days count. And when the time comes, whether in years or decades, you will not resist, you will not beg to stay. You will close your eyes with peace in your chest, knowing that nothing is ending. You are only continuing in another form, another rhythm, another dance. Because this life, as sacred as it is, was never the whole story. And your soul has always known that. There's something about you that people can't quite explain. They might not have the words for it, but they feel it the moment they're near you. It's in the way their shoulders drop without realizing. It's in the way they exhale a little deeper after speaking to you. It's in the way their voice softens, their nervous energy dissolves, their guard gently falls. And it's not because you said something profound. It's not because you offered advice or solutions. It's simply because you were there, because your presence, without needing to try, radiates a peace that others can feel, even if they don't know why. This peace isn't forced. It's not manufactured through meditation apps or affirmations or positive thinking. It's something older, something deeper, something that lives in the bones of your soul. You're not performing calm. You're remembering it. You're embodying it. Because you've already passed through the chaos. You've already walked through fire in lifetimes before this one. You've known war, betrayal, heartbreak, hunger, injustice. You've seen the darkness of the world, and more importantly, you've seen the darkness within yourself, and you didn't run from it. You sat with it. You wept with it. You learned from it. And in doing so, you dissolved the need to control everything. You stopped trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. You stopped trying to save what didn't want to be saved. You surrendered the illusion that you had to fight your way to safety, because you realized that true safety isn't out there, it's in here, in the stillness, in the breath, in the part of you that can't be touched by external storms. That's why, when people come to you with their chaos, they often find themselves unraveling in your presence, not in a bad way, but in a sacred way. Their masks fall off. Their tightly held defenses begin to loosen. They speak truths they've never admitted out loud. They cry without knowing why. They feel seen, not because you analyzed them, but because your soul held them without judgment, without expectation, without needing to change them. That, right there, is your medicine. You've become a mirror that doesn't distort, a light that doesn't blind, a silence that doesn't judge. And it's not because you've mastered some external practice, it's because your soul has remembered its nature, and that nature is peace, not peace that is naive or detached, but peace that is earned. Peace that has walked through lifetimes of conflict and come out the other side with open hands. People often confuse this kind of peace with passivity. They may mistake your softness for weakness. They don't always realize the strength it takes to choose stillness over reactivity, grace over ego, surrender over control. But you've lived it. You've seen how real power doesn't need to dominate. It doesn't need to raise its voice. Real power just is. It anchors, it holds, it listens, it breathes. And that's what you do now. You hold space, you hold truth, you hold the frequency of love without needing it to be returned, and in doing so, you become a sanctuary. People may not understand why they feel better after being with you. They may not have the language for the healing that occurs in your presence, but their nervous systems understand, their hearts understand. Because the soul always recognizes truth, and your soul, in its final chapter, no longer seeks to be loud, it simply radiates. This radiance isn't something you have to maintain. You don't have to wake up every day and try to be calm. It's who you are now, even on your off days, even when you're hurting, because your peace isn't circumstantial. It's not dependent on everything going right. It's a frequency that's been baked into your essence over lifetimes. And now, in this life, it simply emanates, not because you're trying to be spiritual, but because you're no longer pretending to be anything else. Your peace speaks louder than your words ever could. It's felt in your energy long before you speak. That's why you may notice people lingering around you. Not because they want something from you, but because your energy feels like a safe place to rest. In a world addicted to noise, your silence is sacred. In a culture obsessed with proving worth, your presence is a reminder that being is enough. You may not always see the impact you have. You may not realize how much your quiet compassion shifts people. But the ripples you create extend far beyond what your eyes can track. You change rooms without speaking. You heal wounds without diagnosing them. You bring people back to themselves just by being yourself. And in a way, this is the soul's final act, not to do more, but to become more. To be the embodiment of everything it has learned, not in theory, not in preaching, but in everyday moments, in how you greet the barista, in how you respond to criticism, in how you love without needing anything in return, in how you forgive when no apology comes. These small acts, they are sacred. They are the offerings of a soul that no longer seeks to prove anything. You may also notice that your peace is occasionally met with resistance. Some people don't know how to sit in stillness. Some people are afraid of what your energy might reveal about their own. But that's not your burden to carry. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You're not here to be a performer. You're here to be a portal, a quiet opening into a different way of being. Those who are ready will feel it. Those who aren't will remember you when they are. So when you doubt your purpose, remember this. Your energy is your purpose. Your embodiment is your legacy. You don't need a platform. You don't need a spotlight. You don't need to scream your message to the world. Your presence is enough. Your stillness is sacred. And in a world that is constantly spinning, you are the breath between the chaos. You are the reminder that peace isn't something we find, it's something we remember. And when one soul remembers, it helps others remember too. That is what you're doing now. That is what your life is transmitting. Not through force, not through effort, but through resonance. You radiate peace because your soul has come home. And from that place, everything you touch becomes softer. Everything you speak becomes gentler, and everyone you meet, even briefly, leaves carrying a little more light than they had before. There comes a sacred moment on your soul's journey when the seeking stops, not because you've found all the answers, but because you've realized you were never missing them to begin with. It's not dramatic. It doesn't come with a grand awakening or a choir of angels. It's quieter than that, simpler, more profound. One day, you just feel it. The frantic hunger to consume more teachings, more methods, more philosophies, dissolves. The constant reaching outside yourself begins to slow, then fall away altogether. And in its place, there's a stillness, a peace, a sense that you've come full circle, not to a mountaintop of enlightenment, but to something much more intimate. Yourself. You no longer feel the need to chase after gurus, spiritual figures, or mystical secrets. You can still respect their wisdom, you can still read their words, and feel gratitude for the role they played. but there's no pedestal anymore. You no longer believe anyone else holds the keys to your liberation. You've stopped looking up and started looking within, because you now understand that the real temple has always been inside you. And the real teacher? It's been whispering to you in every breath, every heartbeat, every quiet moment when you allowed yourself to listen. This isn't ego. It's not about declaring that you know everything. It's about no longer needing to know everything. The hunger for more knowledge, more practice, more validation from spiritual circles has been replaced by something softer, the trust that what you are is enough. You are no longer building a spiritual identity. You are shedding one. You don't need to prove your evolution. You don't need to broadcast your journey. The truth of your being is speaking so clearly now, it doesn't require translation. You've stopped chasing enlightenment because you've come to realize it's not something to be reached, it's something to be remembered. And remembering doesn't happen through effort. It happens through surrender, through stillness, through the willingness to drop the search and allow what's always been true to rise to the surface. You've spent lifetimes seeking, lifetimes building ladders to the sky, hoping to touch the divine, and now, in this final chapter, you realize, not thine, the divine was never in the sky, it was in your breath, your blood, your being. There is a quiet joy in this return, not the ecstatic, fleeting kind that dances in the highs of spiritual experience, but a deep, grounded joy that says, I'm here, I've always been here, and this is enough. You no longer need visions to believe, you no longer need mystical experiences to feel connected. You've integrated what once felt like fireworks into the rhythm of your daily life. Washing dishes becomes meditation, silence becomes communion. You don't need the extraordinary to feel the sacred. Everything is sacred now. And because of this, you begin to walk through the world differently, not with the posture of a seeker, eyes scanning the horizon for signs, but with the presence of one who has arrived. Your steps are slower, more intentional. You're not rushing toward transformation anymore. You're embodying it. You're not searching for purpose. You're living from your essence. You no longer need to be told you're on the right path. You are the path. And every choice you make from this still point becomes an expression of that knowing. There's a humility that comes with this stage. You don't need to teach others. You don't need to convert anyone to your way. You understand that every soul is walking home in its own time, through its own lessons. You don't interfere. You don't correct. You simply radiate. And those who are ready will feel it. Not in your words, but in your presence, in your groundedness, in the way you hold space without trying to fix or advise, in the way your energy says, you are already whole, you just forgot. The journey is over, but not in the sense that life has ended. It's over in the sense that striving has ended, the illusion of separation has dissolved, the feeling of exile is gone, you are not lost. You are not broken, you are not incomplete, you are home. Not in a place, but in yourself. And that home isn't built from doctrines or practices. It's built from remembering what's eternal within you. The part of you that was never born and will never die. The presence that has quietly watched every version of you unfold. You now understand that every experience, the heartbreaks, the failures, the joys, the awakenings, one's a stepping stone back to this moment. And the beauty is, you don't wish to erase any of it. You don't resent the seeking, it served its purpose, it led you here. But now you see that the seeking was never about finding something new, it was about exhausting every false path until only truth remained. And that truth is breathtaking in its simplicity. You begin to feel more spacious inside, you stop reacting so quickly, you don't take things personally. You see the patterns, the archetypes, the stories playing out all around you, and you watch them with compassion. You no longer need to insert yourself into every drama, you've moved beyond the noise. And, in that quiet, you carry a calm that others feel even if they don't understand it. It's not something you try to create, it's what naturally radiates when you've stopped pretending to be anything other than who you are. You've come to love yourself in a way that's not based on achievements or healing milestones. It's a love that simply is, a love that sees your humanity and holds it gently. You no longer try to perfect yourself. You allow yourself. You no longer try to ascend above being human. You bow to the gift of being here at all. You see your flaws not as problems, but as part of the artistry of being alive. You no longer seek to transcend, you seek to embody. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this: you're not trying to hold on to this state. You're not grasping it like some prize you finally earned. You trust that what is real cannot be lost. And if you ever forget again, if you ever fall back into the illusion of seeking, of striving, of fear, you know that the path home is always within you. And that realization makes everything lighter. You no longer fear losing your way, because now you know there's nowhere to go. You are not a seeker anymore. You are a rememberer, a presence, a quiet flame that no longer flickers in the wind. You have returned to your center, and in that center is everything you ever looked for. You are not waiting for heaven. You are creating it in your stillness, in your surrender, in your being. This is the end of the journey, and it is also the beginning, not of another search but of a deeper living, not of answers but of presence, not of seeking light but of being it. You are home, you are whole, and you always have been.